He dropped to his knees in the middle of the hallway. Not from exhaustion, not from injury. He dropped because his daughter's drawing had fallen out of his sea bag when it hit the floor. Crayon yellow sunstick figure man in a blue uniform, and the moment he saw it, something inside his chest just gave out. 7 months at sea, 41 missions, not one breakdown. And a piece of folded construction paper took him down in 4 seconds flat. He was still on his knees when the door across the hall opened, still on his knees when the suitcase rolled out, still on his knees when she stopped, looked at him. This broken man in full uniform crouched on a hallway floor and said nothing, just waited. That was the moment he heard himself say it. "Come on vacation with me." A joke. Obviously a joke. A man like James Walker doesn't ask strangers anywhere. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. Okay, and he was still on his knees when he realized she meant it. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if that moment hit you, subscribe. Every part of what happens next is worth staying for. The elevator in James Walker's apartment building was broken again. It was always broken the week he came home. He didn't know if that was bad luck or a pattern, but either way, it meant 4 flights of stairs with a sea bag that weighed close to 80 pounds. The same bag he'd dragged across a destroyer deck in the middle of the Philippine Sea. The same one that smelled like diesel fuel and week-old coffee and something he couldn't name but recognized every time he unzipped it. He took the stairs 1 step at a time, not because he was weak. James Walker had never been weak a day in his life. He took them slowly because he was trying to prepare himself. Because somewhere on the other side of apartment 4C was a 6-year-old girl who deserved a father who looked like he had it together. And right now, climbing those stairs, James Walker did not have it together. He had not slept in 31 hours. He had eaten a protein bar and half a bottle of water since leaving the base in Norfolk. He had watched the sun come up through a plane window somewhere over Tennessee and felt absolutely nothing. Not relief, not excitement, not even the dull kind of happiness that used to come automatically when Nashville appeared beneath the clouds. Nothing. Just the quiet buzzing static of a man who had been running on duty for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to simply stop. He reached the 4th floor landing and set the sea bag down, rolled his neck, heard 3 things pop, pulled out his phone and looked at the last message from his sister Carol, who had been watching Mia. "She's asleep. She stayed up till midnight waiting for you. I told her you'd be here in the morning. Don't make me a liar, James." He typed back, "On the stairs now." Then he picked up the bag and walked down the hall. He almost made it to his door without incident. He had his keys out. He was 6 feet away. He was already mentally calculating how long he could stand in the shower before Carol woke up and started asking questions 45 minutes, maybe an hour if he ran the hot water tank dry, when the door to apartment 4B swung open without warning, and a rolling suitcase came flying out into the hallway directly into his path. James sidestepped. His sea bag did not. The bag hit the suitcase. The suitcase hit the wall. Something inside it shifted hard. He heard what sounded like glass bottles knocking against each other, and he had exactly half a second to wince before the woman appeared in the doorway. He recognized her. Barely. Clara Bennett, 4B. She'd moved in about 8 months ago, right before his last deployment. They'd exchanged maybe 6 complete sentences in all that time. She was quiet, kept to herself. He knew she worked in marketing, or had worked in marketing, because he'd heard the phone calls through the wall sometimes when he was packing his gear. Tense calls. Long silences followed by a voice that stayed controlled a beat too long, the way voices do when they are working very hard not to break. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. He had his own walls. Now she was standing in her doorway at 6:42 in the morning in a gray hoodie and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in the kind of quick knot that says, "I did not sleep well," either, staring at the suitcase against the wall with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not angry, not startled, something in between. "Sorry," James said automatically. "That was my bag. I wasn't paying attention." "No, it was mine." She stepped out and grabbed the suitcase handle, checked the side zipper. It rolled. "You okay?" She looked up at him then, and for a second he thought she was going to say something real. The kind of thing people almost say and then don't. Her eyes were tired in the specific way that isn't about sleep, the kind of tired that lives behind the eyes and doesn't go away after a good night's rest. "Fine," she said. He nodded, looked at the suitcase, looked back at her. "Going somewhere." "I was thinking about it." He shifted his sea bag to his other shoulder. His back was screaming at him. His knee, the same knee he'd torqued during a nighttime deck operation off Guam 2 years ago, and never quite rested long enough to heal, was sending small electric protests up into his hip. He was running on fumes, and he knew it. And maybe that's why he said it. Maybe that's why the words came out before his brain caught up with his mouth. Because when you haven't slept in 31 hours, and your body is running on caffeine and muscle memory and sheer stubborn habit, your filters stop working. The things you'd normally keep behind your teeth just walk right out into the open air. He looked at her suitcase, then at her, then back at the hallway that smelled like someone had burned coffee on the second floor, and he heard himself say, "I've got 4 days of leave starting today. No orders, no missions." He paused, shook his head like he was surprised by his own voice. "Come on vacation with me." He expected a laugh. That polite, slightly awkward laugh neighbors give you when you say something that lands weird. He was already loading up the recovery line in his head, just kidding. Obviously have a safe trip. Wherever you're going, already turning toward his door, already moving on. She looked at him for a long moment, not laughing, not looking away. "Okay," she said, just like that. "Okay." One word, flat and calm, and completely serious, like he'd asked her if she wanted the last cup of coffee. James Walker, who had navigated 15-foot swells, who had kept his voice level while a man on his crew went into cardiac arrest 40 miles off the coast of Japan, who had buried his wife at 31 and raised a daughter alone and never once in the years since let anything catch him completely off guard, stood in that hallway and had absolutely nothing. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She tilted her head slightly. "You were serious, right?" "I..." He stopped, started again. "I was being... because I can say no," she said. "I was already going somewhere. It doesn't have to be complicated." "I was being sarcastic," he said. "Kind of." "Kind of isn't no." He looked at her. She looked at him. The suitcase sat between them like a question mark. "I have a 6-year-old daughter," he said. "She's in my apartment right now, asleep on the couch." "Okay." "My sister's with her." "Okay." I wasn't actually... James." She said his name like she'd used it before, even though he couldn't remember the last time she had. "You look like you haven't slept in 2 days. You just got home from wherever they send you, and you accidentally invited a stranger on vacation." She reached down and straightened the suitcase handle. "Worst case, we have coffee somewhere, and you take your daughter to the beach by yourself. Best case..." She stopped, shrugged one shoulder. "I don't know what best case looks like yet. Do you?" He did not. He absolutely did not. Carol was awake when he came through the door. She was sitting at his kitchen table with a mug of something hot, still in the oversized Alabama sweatshirt she'd been sleeping in. And she looked up at him the way older sisters look at you when they've been waiting long enough that all the emotion has burned away, and what's left is just expectation. "You're late," she said. 40 minutes. Mia was up at 5. I told her another hour. He set the sea bag down by the door and unzipped his boots. "She's still asleep." "Barely." Carol watched him. "You look terrible." "Thank you." "I mean it. You look like something the Navy dragged in." "The Navy did drag me in. That's the whole deal, Carol." She wrapped both hands around her mug and kept looking at him with that expression, the one that meant she was working up to something. Carol was not a woman who worked up to things quietly. She just sometimes needed a moment to decide how direct she wanted to be. She landed on direct. "Donna called me last week," she said. James went still. He was pulling off his second boot, and he just stopped boot in hand and looked at the floor. "She wanted to know if you were seeing anyone," Carol said. "I'm not." "I know. I told her that. She said some of the other wives were talking about you at the family readiness meeting." Carol, I'm just telling you I know what you're telling me. He set the boot down, stood up. And I appreciate it, but I'm not doing this right now. I've been awake since... He looked at his watch. Yesterday. She pressed her lips together. Let it go. For now. There's eggs in the fridge, she said. I wasn't sure if you'd eaten. I'm fine. You always say that. Because it's always close enough to true. He walked to Mia's room. Her room, even though it was technically his office. And she technically slept in the apartment 3 days a week when she wasn't at Carol's during deployments, and pushed the door open 6 inches. She was curled under her comforter, small and impossibly still, the way children get when they're that deep in sleep. Her hair was across her face. One arm was hanging off the side of the pull-out cot. On the nightstand was a drawing she must have made a stick figure man in a blue uniform, and a small girl with a yellow sun over their heads, and underneath it, in 6-year-old handwriting that tilted slightly to the right. Daddy comes home today. 3 exclamation points. He stood there for a long time. Then he pulled the door shut, quietly, went to the bathroom, turned the shower as hot as it would go, and stood under it until the water ran cold. He should have slept. He knew he should have slept. His body was telling him in the specific loud language that only activates after extended sleep deprivation, the slight visual lag, the way conversations had started echoing slightly in his head, the full-body heaviness that sat behind his eyes and in his shoulders like wet concrete. He didn't sleep. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table after Carol left. He stared at the wall above the refrigerator where Mia had taped a drawing of the ocean she'd made in 1st grade, and he tried to feel the thing he was supposed to feel when he came home. The relief, the gratitude, the warmth. He'd felt it before. He knew it existed because he could remember the shape of it from when Emma was alive, that specific feeling of a door closing behind you and the world being smaller and safer and all yours for a few hours. He remembered it clearly enough to know what it felt like when it wasn't there. And right now, sitting in his kitchen in an apartment that was clean, because Carol had cleaned it with a child asleep 20 feet away, who had made him a sign with 3 exclamation points. Right now he felt the concrete stillness of a man who was running out of the things that used to keep him moving. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize, and then he realized it wasn't a number he didn't recognize. It was Clara from next door. She must have slipped a note under his door with her number while he was in the shower. The note was on the table. He hadn't opened it. The text said, "If you were serious, I looked up a place. It's 4 hours from here, coast, small town. Quiet. It's available starting tomorrow." He stared at the text for a long time. Then he looked at the drawing above the refrigerator. Then at the hallway where his sea bag was still sitting by the door, still smelling like the Pacific. He typed back, "How far is it from the beach?" Her reply came fast, walking distance. He set the phone down, picked it up again. Typed, "I need to ask my sister first." Sent it before he could think too hard about what it meant that he was asking at all. Mia woke up at 8:17. He heard her before he saw her. The shuffle of small feet, the sound of her pulling the door open, and then her voice still rough with sleep. "Daddy." She was standing in the doorway in her pajamas, the ones with the stars on them that she'd had since she was 4, and were now about 2 inches too short in the legs, and she was looking at him the way she always looked at him the first morning back. Like she wasn't sure yet if he was real, like she'd been burned by expectations before, and was still deciding how much to trust them. He pushed back from the table. "Hey, baby." She crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and climbed into his lap without asking, because she never had to ask, and buried her face against his shoulder, and he held her with both arms, and felt something in his chest that he didn't have a word for. Something that wasn't the concrete stillness, and wasn't the warmth he remembered, but was something else. Something smaller, and more fragile, and more honest. "You smell like the boat," she said into his shoulder. "I showered." Still the boat. Yeah. He pressed his mouth to the top of her head. "I know." She leaned back and looked at him seriously. She had her mother's eyes. Emma's eyes, dark and direct, the kind that looked at you and didn't look away. "Are you going back? In 4 days?" She processed that. He watched her process it. She was 6, but she had been doing this math since she was 4, and she was very good at it now. 4 days is enough time for the beach, she said. He looked at her. You said you'd take me to the beach, she said. Before Christmas. You said when you came back. I know I did. So... He was quiet for a moment. What if I told you someone else was coming with us? Mia looked at him with Emma's eyes and tilted her head exactly the way Emma used to. Who? Neighbor from next door, Clara. The quiet one. You know her? She gave me a granola bar in the elevator once. It had chocolate chips. Mia considered this. She's nice. Yeah. A pause. Does she like the beach? I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know very much about her yet. Mia seemed to find this acceptable. She leaned back against his shoulder again. 4 days, she said, like she was checking the math one more time. 4 days, he confirmed. Outside, the Nashville morning was coming up slow and gray through the kitchen window. His phone buzzed once on the table. He didn't look at it. For exactly this moment, he was still. Not empty. Not numb. Not running on duty and static, and the long, practiced muscle of just keeping going. Just a man sitting at a kitchen table with his daughter's weight in his arms. Just a man who had without fully meaning to said yes to something he didn't understand yet. Carol said no 3 times before she said yes. The first no came when James told her he was thinking about taking Mia to the beach for his 4 days of leave. That no was soft, more of a, "Are you sure you're not too exhausted?" than an actual refusal. The second no came when he mentioned Clara. Who? Carol set her mug down. Next door. 4B. The woman you've said maybe 10 words to in 8 months. Closer to 20. James. She's going somewhere anyway. He stopped. Started again. I don't know. It happened fast. Carol looked at him, the way she had been looking at him since they were kids. Like she was deciding how much rope to give him before she grabbed the other end. You just got home. You've been at sea for 7 months. You haven't slept. And your first decision is to take a stranger on vacation with your 6-year-old daughter. She's not a stranger. She's a neighbor. That's the same thing, James. Carol. I'm serious. You don't know this woman. Mia doesn't know her. Mia said she's nice. The granola bar thing. Carol stared at him. The granola bar thing. Chocolate chips. Apparently it left an impression. Carol picked up her mug again, which was what she did when she was trying to decide whether to laugh or scream. She held it with both hands and looked out the window for a long moment. The third no came out quieter than the first 2. James, I worry about you. You come home empty every time. You push through it alone every time. And I don't want you to grab onto something just because it's the first warm thing in reach. He didn't answer right away, because that was the one that landed. I know, he finally said. I know that's what it could be. But, he looked at Mia's drawing on the wall. But I told Mia about the beach before Christmas. I meant it then. I still mean it. He paused. And maybe it's okay to not go alone this time. Carol was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You call me every night. Mia calls me every night. Deal. And if it gets weird, we come home. She exhaled through her nose. You're already packed. I never unpacked. She shook her head, but she wasn't saying no anymore. He knocked on 4B 40 minutes later. Clara opened the door wearing the same gray hoodie now with a coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other. She looked at him like she'd been expecting him, which somehow made it worse. My sister said okay? He said. Your sister needed to approve it. She was watching my daughter. It's just there's logistics. Right. Clara stepped back. You want to come in for a minute? He did not particularly want to come in. Coming in felt like a commitment he hadn't fully thought through. But she was already turning back toward the kitchen, and it seemed rude to stand in the doorway, so he came in. Her apartment was the mirror image of his same layout, same windows, same radiator that clanked in February, but it felt like a different country. His had Mia's drawings on the refrigerator and a sea bag by the door, and the specific organized emptiness of a space that's maintained rather than lived in. Hers had bookshelves that were actually full of half-finished canvas on the wall she'd clearly painted herself, and a kitchen table buried under what looked like a controlled collapse of notebooks and folders and sticky notes. She caught him looking at the table. "I'm in the middle of something," she said. "What kind of something?" She hesitated. "Just long enough to be noticeable." "Work stuff. It doesn't matter." She set her coffee down and picked up her phone, turned the screen toward him. "I found this place. It's a rental, small, 2 bedrooms. She looked at him directly when she said that. 2 bedrooms. "I wasn't assuming." "I know, I'm just saying." "Right. It's got a porch that faces the water. The town it's in is small, maybe 4 streets, a diner, a general store. Quiet." She pulled the phone back. "Mia would like it." "You researched a place that Mia would like." "You mentioned her. It seemed relevant." He looked at her for a moment. She was not a nervous person. Most people, when they're about to spend 4 days with someone they barely know, show some version of nerves. They talk too fast, or they avoid eye contact, or they laugh at things that aren't funny. Clara did none of those things. She stood in her kitchen and held her coffee and looked at him like this was a practical arrangement, and she was simply covering the details. "Why are you actually doing this?" he asked. She didn't flinch. "I was going somewhere anyway." "You said that. But where?" A beat. "Nowhere specific." "So just away." "Yeah." She looked at her coffee. "Just away." He understood that. He understood it in the specific way that only people who have spent a long time running from their own stillness understand it. You don't always need a destination. Sometimes the point is just to not be where you are. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We leave tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Mia's an early riser anyway." Clara almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. "I'll be ready." The car was a rental. His truck was in long-term base storage, and by the time he'd loaded Clara's one suitcase into the trunk, alongside his own bag, and Mia's purple rolling backpack that was somehow heavier than all of them. Combined, it was 6:14 a.m., and Mia was already in the back seat asking questions. "How far is it?" 4 hours, James said. "How many songs is that?" "Depends on the songs." "My songs or your songs?" He glanced in the rearview mirror. She was buckled in backpack on her lap, looking at Clara in the front passenger seat with the frank, unfiltered curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she isn't looking. "Clara," Mia said, "do you like Taylor Swift?" Clara turned around in her seat. "Some of it." "Which songs?" "The sad ones, mostly." Mia considered this. "Daddy only likes the sad ones too. He says the happy ones are too fast." "That's not what I said," James said. "You said they were hectic. That's different from—" "What's hectic mean?" Mia asked Clara. "Too much happening at once," Clara said. "Yeah." Mia looked at her father. "That's what you said." James merged onto the interstate and said nothing. Clara looked out the window. He caught the edge of an expression on her face, not quite a smile, not quite amusement, something smaller and quieter than both of those things, like something she was holding carefully to keep it from spilling. They drove in silence for a while after that, a comfortable silence which surprised him. He had expected it to be awkward, 2 adults who didn't know each other, stuck in a car for 4 hours with a 6-year-old mediating, but it wasn't. Mia fell asleep somewhere around mile 40, head tipped against the window, and then it was just the road, and the low sound of the radio, and the early light coming flat and gold across the Tennessee hills. Clara spoke first. "How long have you been in the Navy?" 11 years. Single the whole time. He glanced at her. She was still looking out the window, which made the question feel less pointed than it was. "My wife died 4 years ago," he said. "Before that? No." A beat. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." "What was her name?" Nobody asked that. Most people asked what happened, or they said "I'm so sorry," and then changed the subject to something easier. Nobody asked her name. Emma, he said. Clara nodded, kept looking at the road ahead. She must have been something to leave a daughter like that. He didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure he could. Yeah, he finally said. She was something. They stopped once 2 hours in at a gas station diner that had a hand-painted sign above the door reading, "Breakfast all day, attitude free." Mia ordered pancakes and ate 3/4 of them and then announced she was done. James drank 2 cups of coffee and felt marginally more human. Clara ordered eggs and ate everything on her plate and didn't look at her phone once, which he noticed because it seemed unusual and then felt guilty for noticing. "You always eat like that?" he asked. She looked up. "Like what?" "Like you're paying attention to it." She looked mildly confused. "Isn't that how you're supposed to eat? Most people I know eat and scroll." "I don't have anything I want to look at right now." She said it simply without drama. Then, after a second, "My phone has been bad for me lately." He didn't push, but she kept going anyway slowly like she was testing the words before she committed to them. "I had a job. Good job on paper. Big agency, real clients, the kind of accounts that look impressive when you say them out loud." She moved her fork against the edge of her plate. "And a relationship. Also good on paper. Smart man successful, knew exactly what he wanted." She paused. "Turned out what he wanted was to know where I was every hour of the day and have opinions about who I talked to and how long I took to reply to his messages." James was quiet. "I left the relationship 8 months ago," she said. "Still working on leaving the job." "What's keeping you?" She looked out the diner window. "Fear mostly. The specific kind where you've been told so many times that you're not as capable as you think you are, that you start doing the other person's work for them." He understood that too. Not the same shape, not even close to the same shape, but the core of it, the way a voice you've heard too many times starts sounding like your own. He understood that. "The notebooks," he said. "On your table." She looked at him. "That's the something you're in the middle of. That's not work stuff." She studied him for a moment. "You're more observant than you look." "Navy thing. It's a business plan," she said quietly. "Freelance. My own clients, my own hours, no one to answer to, but myself." She half laughed, and it was the first completely unguarded thing she'd done since he'd known her. "It terrifies me." "Most real things do." She looked at him. He looked at her. Mia across the table was stacking sugar packets into a tower without looking up. They arrived at the cottage at just past noon. It was small, genuinely small. The kind of small that means you will learn very quickly whether you can exist in close quarters with someone with a porch facing the water, and 2 bedrooms with doors that actually closed, and a kitchen that had exactly enough in it to function. It smelled like salt and wood and the specific cold clean of a place that's been empty for a week and is glad to have people again. Mia ran straight through the front room, out the back door, and onto the porch in under 10 seconds. "The ocean is right there," she shouted back at them. "I see that," James called. "Can I go down? When I'm with you." "When will that be?" "Give me 5 minutes." "Daddy?" "Mia." A pause. Then, "Okay, but 5 actual minutes." He set the bags down in the front room. Clara stood a few feet away, looking around the space with a careful expression. He couldn't tell what she was thinking. He was starting to understand that this was a consistent feature of her. She processed things internally before she let them out, which was the opposite of how most people worked, and which he found unexpectedly restful. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." She looked at him. "Are you?" The question caught him off guard. Not because it was complicated, because most people didn't ask it like they actually wanted the answer. They asked it as a greeting, a formality, a checkpoint, before moving on to something else. She asked it, and then just waited. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. She nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer. "Me neither." She picked up her suitcase and carried it to the smaller bedroom. He heard the door close, not loudly, just closed. He stood in the front room for a moment and listened to Mia's feet on the porch boards and the ocean pushing against the shore, and the specific silence of a house, where for the first time in longer than he could remember, he was not alone, but not performing for anyone either. He went to find his daughter. The afternoon was easy in the way that surprises you. Mia found a shell the size of her fist and carried it everywhere for 3 hours, narrating its significance to anyone who would listen. James walked with her at the edge of the water shoes off the cold Atlantic, pressing up between his toes, and for stretches of 10 and 15 minutes, he didn't think about the deployment, or the next one, or the paperwork on his desk at the base, or the phone call. He still owed his commanding officer. He just walked. Clara came down to the beach mid-afternoon. She didn't announce it. He looked back toward the cottage, and she was just there, sitting on the bottom porch step with a notebook, not writing in it, just holding it, watching the water. He walked Mia up to her. "What you writing?" Mia asked immediately and without preamble. "Nothing yet," Clara said, still thinking. "About what?" "Big things." Mia accepted this with the seriousness it deserved. "I think about big things too sometimes," she said. "Mostly at bedtime." "Me too," Clara said. Mia held out the shell. "You can hold this if you want. It helps." Clara looked at it, looked at Mia. Then she took the shell and held it in both hands and said, "Thank you. That does help." Mia nodded satisfied and ran back toward the water. James watched her go. Then he looked at Clara, who was still holding the shell, and he thought about 11 years of missions and 4 years of grief, and one morning in a hallway with a sea bag and a rolling suitcase. And he thought about how the strangest things sometimes line up at the strangest times, and how you never see them coming until you're already in the middle of them. "She likes you," he said. Clara looked up. "I like her. She doesn't warm up to people fast. Takes after me." "Is that your way of saying you're warming up too?" He didn't answer. He sat down on the step beside her and looked at the water where Mia was jumping the shallow waves with both feet and laughing so loud it carried all the way back to them on the wind. Clara didn't push for an answer. She just handed him the shell, and somehow sitting there on that step, with the ocean in front of them, and a 6-year-old's laughter in the air, that was enough. That night, after Mia was asleep, James sat on the porch with a beer he barely drank and listened to the water. He heard Clara come out behind him. She sat in the other chair without asking, and without making it a thing, and for a long time neither of them spoke. Then she said quietly into the dark, "Why did you really say it in the hallway?" He thought about lying. He was good at lying by omission. The Navy had made him excellent at saying true things that weren't the whole truth. But he was tired, and the water was loud, and there was something about the specific dark of a place you've never been that makes honesty easier than it has any right to be. "Because I was on my knees in a hallway over a piece of paper my daughter drew," he said. "And I looked up and there was a person, a real person, not a colleague, not a superior, not someone waiting on a report, just a person." He paused. "And I panicked." "You panic by inviting strangers on vacation." "Apparently." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's either the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me, or the strangest." "Probably both." She leaned her head back in the chair and looked up at whatever stars were out. "For what it's worth," she said, "I said okay because I was standing in that hallway, deciding whether to go right or go left, and I'd been making that decision for 8 months, without actually making it. And then this man on his knees in a uniform with a crayon drawing asked me the most absurd question anyone's asked me in years." She exhaled slowly. "And it just cut through everything." He turned to look at her. She was still looking up at the sky. "Sometimes the absurd thing is the only honest thing left," she said. He looked back at the water, drank the last cold inch of his beer. "Yeah," he said. "I think that's right." The waves kept coming. The dark stayed quiet. And somewhere inside the cottage, Mia was asleep with her enormous shell on the nightstand, keeping the big thoughts away until morning. The second morning was easier than the first. That was the thing about places you'd never been. They didn't carry the weight of everything you'd done wrong in them yet. James woke up before 5 out of habit muscle memory. 11 years of the Navy telling his body that stillness after 0500 was a luxury he hadn't earned. He lay in the dark for a few minutes listening. No engine hum, no crew, no radio cutting through the wall. Just the ocean doing what it always did. Pushing and pulling, and somewhere down the hall, the small, even breathing of a 6-year-old who had fallen asleep still holding a shell. He got up, made coffee, stood on the porch in the cold with both hands around the mug, and watched the water turn gray, and then silver, and then the specific pale gold of an early coastal morning. And for the first time in longer than he could name, he did not immediately reach for his phone. He just stood there. Clara found him like that when she came out at 6:30. She had a blanket around her shoulders, and her hair was down, which was different from how he'd seen it before, and she looked at him, and then at the water, and then she said nothing at all. She just stood beside him and looked at the same thing he was looking at. He handed her his mug without thinking about it. She took it without making it a moment. They stood like that until Mia's voice came through the screen door, "Daddy, the ocean is still there," and the morning officially began. Those hours were good. Genuinely good, the kind of good that feels almost suspicious when you're not used to it. They walked the beach, the three of them, Mia between them and slightly ahead, the way children always are pulling them forward by the sheer force of her momentum. She found 2 more shells, a piece of sea glass the color of a swimming pool, and what she was convinced was a shark tooth, but was almost certainly a broken muscle. James let her keep it anyway. Clara helped her wrap it in a piece of paper towel so it wouldn't get lost. It was a small thing, but he noticed it. He was noticing a lot of small things about Clara Bennett, and he was doing his best not to read too much into any of them. The call from his commanding officer came at 11:30. He stepped off the porch and walked down toward the waterline to take it, which was automatic private call, private space, even when the space was a beach with nobody on it. Lieutenant Commander Harris was not a man who called during leave unless something had moved. "Walker, you good?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Listen, nothing's changed on your end. You've got your 4 days. I just need you to know there's a situation developing in the Pacific. Nothing that affects your unit yet, but we're watching it. Be ready to cut leave short if the order comes." "Understood." "How's the kid?" "She found what she thinks is a shark tooth." Harris laughed the short practical laugh of a man who also had children and knew exactly what that meant. "Good for her. Enjoy it, Walker. That's an order." "Yes, sir." He hung up and stood at the waterline for a moment. The water came up to his feet and he didn't step back. Cold, sharp, real. Be ready to cut leave short. He was always ready. That was the problem. He was so ready to leave at any moment that he had stopped fully arriving anywhere. He walked back up to where Clara was sitting on the sand, watching Mia draw letters in the wet sand with a stick. "Everything okay?" Clara asked. She read him fast, he was starting to realize. She didn't do it with any performance, didn't lean forward or make her voice softer, or do any of the things people did when they were performing concern. She just looked at him and asked. "Routine check-in," he said. "They might need to cut leave short." "How short?" "Don't know yet. Could be nothing." She nodded, turned back to watch Mia. Then after a moment, "Does that happen a lot?" "Often enough that I stopped counting." "What's that like for her?" He sat down in the sand beside her. "She handles it better than I do," he said. "Kids are adaptable, or she's adaptable. I don't know if that's a good thing or just a thing." "You feel guilty about it?" It wasn't a question. "Every day," he said. "Every single day." Mia had written her name in the sand and was now adding a star next to it. She held the stick with her whole fist, the way she'd held crayons when she was 3 and hadn't broken the habit. "Emma would have been better at this," he said. He didn't plan it. It just came out. The balance of it, being gone and being home. She had this ability to make things feel continuous. Like even when something was hard, it was part of something larger. She'd have made it make sense to Mia in a way I can't. Clara was quiet. "I tell her the truth," he continued. "That's all I've got. Daddy has to go do his job. Daddy is coming back. Daddy loves you more than anything. 3 sentences and I repeat them until they're the wallpaper of her life." He paused. "I don't know if that's enough." "She drew you a sign with 3 exclamation points," Clara said quietly. "I'd say it's registering." He looked at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching Mia. "How do you know about the sign?" he asked. "Your door was open when I came out that morning, before the hallway. She paused. I wasn't looking. I just saw it through the gap. He was quiet for a moment. She made it at school, he said. Her teacher helped her with the letters. The exclamation points were all her, though. I could tell. He almost smiled. Almost. The storm came in fast, the way coastal storms do. No long warning, just a shift in the air around 3 in the afternoon, and then the sky doing something heavy and gray in the west, and then inside an hour, the kind of rain that doesn't suggest staying inside so much as it commands it. They were already back at the cottage when it hit, which was the only mercy. Mia stood at the window and watched it with unambiguous delight. It's so loud, she said with the specific reverence of a child who has not yet learned to find weather threatening. Away from the window, Mia. I'm not touching it, I'm just... Away from the window. She backed up 3 steps, which was a compromise. He let it go. The power went out at 4:17. It didn't make a dramatic announcement. The lights just stopped, and the small hum of the refrigerator that you never notice until it's gone went silent, and the 3 of them stood in the sudden gray dark of the cottage and adjusted. Candles, Clara said. Not a question, she'd already spotted them in the kitchen cabinet that afternoon, the kind of thing she apparently noticed without being asked to notice. She found them by feel, more than sight, found the matches beside them, and within 5 minutes had 4 candles going on the kitchen table and 2 more on the counter. Mia immediately wanted to help. You can hold the matchbox, Clara told her. Mia held the matchbox with both hands and the gravity of someone carrying a torch. I'm helping, she announced. You are, Clara confirmed. James watched them from across the kitchen and felt something move through him that he didn't immediately have a name for. Mia's tablet still had battery. That was how they made it to 7 o'clock, a cartoon James had seen 40 times popcorn made on the gas stove, because the gas still worked the 3 of them on the couch, under the blankets Clara had brought from the bedrooms. Mia between them. The storm making noise outside like it had an opinion about everything. When Mia fell asleep mid-episode, James carried her to her room and tucked her in and stood in the doorway for a moment looking at her. The shell was on the nightstand. She had one hand under her cheek. He went back to the living room. Clara had moved to the kitchen table. The candles were still going. She had her phone face up in front of her, and she was looking at it the way people look at things they know they should ignore but can't quite make themselves put down. Who is it? He asked. He didn't know why he asked that either. He was full of words tonight that bypassed his filters. She looked up. What? The phone. You've been not looking at it all day, and now you're looking at it. Who is it? She turned it face down. Marcus. He sat down across from her. The relationship you left. Ex-relationship. She said it firmly, like she needed to hear herself say it. He found out I was away, and he does this thing where he doesn't say anything directly. He just sends these messages that are framed like concern. Just checking on you. Hope you're being safe. Seems impulsive going somewhere alone. She said the last one with a flatness that told him she was quoting it nearly verbatim. Nothing you can point to and say that's wrong, but all of it designed to make you feel surveilled. Are you going to respond? I don't know. Don't, he said. She looked at him. I know that's easy for me to say, he said. But I've watched people hold on to that kind of thing, the thread back to something that already ended, because cutting it feels like falling. And mostly, they just delay the fall. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned the phone over, looked at the message one more time, and turned it face down again. 8 months, she said. I left 8 months ago, and he's still... She stopped. Started differently. When you're in it, you tell yourself it's complicated. You tell yourself he's not a bad person. He just has a complicated way of loving. And then you get out of it, and you get 6 months of distance, and you realize... She pressed her fingers against the table. It was never complicated. It was just controlling. And I called it complicated because complicated sounds like something you work through, and controlling sounds like something that's already decided. James looked at her in the candlelight. She wasn't crying. She wasn't close to crying. She was something harder than that, clear-eyed and tired and in the specific stage of aftermath where you're done being sad about something and just irritated that it took you so long. The business plan, he said. She looked at him. "That's the cut," he said. "That's you not falling. You already started building the thing you're going to land on." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're doing that Navy thing again," she said, reading the room. Occupational hazard. She picked up the phone and without drama, without announcing it, turned it off completely and set it back down. "There," she said. "There," he agreed. It was past 9 when his own phone rang. He saw the contact name and his whole body shifted before he even answered the particular physical change that happens when you have a child and you receive a call after dark. But it wasn't Carol calling about Mia. It was a video call from the iPad, which meant Mia had woken up and found it. He answered. Her face filled the screen. Hair messy from sleep, eyes not fully open. She was sitting up in her bed in the dark of the cottage bedroom, which should not have been funny, but was somehow both funny and unbearable at the same time. "Hey," he said. "You're supposed to be asleep. The storm woke me up." "It's okay. You're safe inside." "I know that." She looked at him seriously through the screen. "Daddy." "Yeah. When we go home." She stopped, looked down at the comforter. "Are you going back to the boat?" "4 days, baby. That's what I said." "But then you go back." He didn't lie to her. He never lied to her. "Then I go back." She was quiet. The storm made noise outside. He heard Clara behind him, very still, not moving. "I don't like the in-between part," Mia said. "The in-between part. When you're gone but not home yet, the in-between part." She pulled the comforter up. "It's the longest part." He looked at his daughter's face on the screen, 6 years old, more honest than anyone twice her age, sitting in the dark with a shell on her nightstand, and asking him the question he had been asking himself for 4 years, and he had nothing, no 3 sentences. No daddy loves you more than anything that covered this specific thing. "I know it is," he said. "I know. Are you okay?" she asked. He almost laughed, his daughter asking him the same question Clara had asked him that morning, asking it the same way like she actually wanted the answer. "I'm getting there," he said. Mia looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded, slow and serious, like this was a satisfactory report. "Okay," she said. "Good night, Daddy." "Good night, baby. Shell's on the nightstand." "I know, it helped." She reached out and ended the call. He sat with the dark phone in his hands. Clara didn't say anything. She didn't offer a reflection, or a comfort, or a pivot. She just sat there in the candlelight and let the moment be what it was, and that specific quality of hers, the ability to not fill silence with something unnecessary, was the thing that made him say what he said next. He didn't plan it. He didn't weigh it. He looked at the table and said, "I don't know how to stop being alone. Not I've been lonely, not it's been hard." Those were things you said when you were managing the conversation. What he said was the raw version, the one underneath all the managed versions. Clara didn't move. "I know how to function alone," he said. "I've been doing it for 4 years and I'm good at it. I know how to run the apartment and pay the bills and pack Mia's lunches on a Tuesday at 5 a.m. before a flight to God knows where. I'm competent at alone." He stopped. "But I don't know how to stop being it. I don't know what the—" He shook his head. "I don't know what the next part looks like." The candle on the table between them had burned down until the flame was low and close to the wax. Clara looked at it. Then she looked at him. She didn't give him an answer because there wasn't one to give, and she was smart enough to know that. What she did was reach across the table and set her hand flat on the table close to his. Not on his hand. Not touching. Just there. An inch away. Available without being presumptuous. He looked at her hand. Then he turned his own palm up on the table. She moved her hand the last inch. Outside, the storm pushed against the windows. The candle flame bent sideways and held. The ocean was doing what it always did. Pushing and pulling. Pushing and pulling. And inside the dark cottage, 2 people who had both spent a very long time being alone sat at a kitchen table and held on to each other with the careful, deliberate honesty of people who have been burned before and are not pretending otherwise. Neither of them spoke. For once, the silence was not empty. It was full of everything they were both still learning how to say. He didn't sleep well, not because of the storm that had quieted somewhere around midnight, pulling back the way storms do when they've made their point. Not because of the cottage, which was quiet in the specific way that small coastal places get, when the wind drops and the only sound left is the water finding the shore over and over in the dark. He didn't sleep because of his own hand, the way he'd turned his palm up on that table, the way she'd moved that last inch. He lay in the dark of the bedroom ceiling and went over it the way he went over mission decisions, not with regret exactly, but with the careful attention of a man who understands that small choices have long consequences. Turning your palm up on a table at 11 o'clock at night in a candlelit cottage during a storm is not a small choice. It looks like one. It feels like one in the moment. But James Walker had been alive long enough and alone long enough to know that the small choices were almost always the ones that changed everything. He got up at 5 again, made coffee again, stood on the porch again. The ocean looked the same as it always did. He found that comforting. Clara came out at 6:15, same blanket around her shoulders. She looked at him and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything about last night, which was itself a kind of conversation. The one that says, I'm not running from it, but I'm also not going to make it into something it hasn't decided to be yet. She took the mug he offered. They watched the water. You okay? She asked. Getting there, he said. She almost smiled. He'd said the same thing to Mia last night. She'd heard it. Me too, she said. But Mia woke up at 7 in a decisive mood. She wanted to go into town. She had decided this before she was fully dressed, announcing it from the hallway in her pajama top and yesterday's jeans, one sock on and one sock in her hand. The diner, she said. I want the pancakes again. We had pancakes 2 days ago, James said. And they were good, Mia said with the unassailable logic of a 6-year-old. So, Clara looked at him over Mia's head. He looked back at her. It was the kind of look that passes between two people who are not yet a unit, but are beginning to move like one quick wordless carrying more than it appears to on the surface. Pancakes, he said. Mia pulled on her second sock in triumph. The town was 4 streets like Clara had said, and the diner was on the corner of the main one, a place called Patty's that had been there since 1987, according to the sign above the door, and smelled like butter and coffee, and the particular warmth of a place that has fed a lot of people through a lot of mornings. They took a booth by the window. Mia sat beside Clara without being asked, to which James noticed and filed away without commenting on. A woman named Deb took their order. She was in her 60s, efficient, had the pen behind the ear and the coffee pot in hand before they'd finished deciding. She looked at the three of them with the easy, non-invasive interest of someone who has watched a lot of people come through her diner and has learned to read them quickly. Vacation, she asked. Few days, James said. Nice family. She said already writing, already moving. None of them corrected her. Mia looked at James. James looked at Clara. Clara looked at her coffee cup and did the thing she did where she was working something out internally before she let it show on her face. Then Mia said very simply, She thought we were a family. She did, James said. Are we? The question landed on the table like a third cup of coffee, unexpected present requiring attention. James opened his mouth. Clara got there first gently. We're friends on a trip, she said. That's a good thing to be. Mia considered this. Friends can be like family, though, she said. They can, Clara agreed. My friend Josie is like family. We share lunches. That's very serious, Clara said. It is, Mia confirmed. And then she was done with it, moving on to arranging the sugar packets into a different configuration than last time, and the moment passed, or appeared to pass, leaving something behind in the air that neither James nor Clara reached for yet. The photograph happened by accident. They were walking back from the diner, taking the long way around the block, because Mia had spotted a dog tied outside a hardware store and needed to say hello to it. The dog's name was apparently Biscuit, according to his tag, and Mia spent 4 minutes introducing herself to Biscuit in formal terms, while the dog accepted this with professional dignity. James had his phone out to take a picture of Mia and the dog. Clara was standing slightly to his left, not in the frame, or so he thought. Mia grabbed Clara's hand at the last second to pull her into the picture the way children do without asking permission, operating on the assumption that more people in a photo is always better. He took the picture. Mia and Clara and Biscuit. Mia grinning with her whole face, Clara caught mid-surprise with an expression he hadn't seen on her before, open, unguarded, almost young. It was a good picture. He looked at it for a moment, and then put his phone back in his pocket. He didn't think anything more of it. He should have. They were back at the cottage by noon. Mia was on the porch with her collection of shells arranged in a system that apparently had rules she had not fully explained to anyone. Clara was at the kitchen table with the notebook open, actually writing in it this time, not just holding it, and James was on the couch with his eyes half closed in the particular, not quite sleep of a person whose body has finally started to believe that no alarm is coming. His phone buzzed. Carol. He picked up. Hey. James. Her voice had a specific register he recognized. Not the worried Carol register, not the practical Carol register, but the, I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else. Carol register. How are you doing? Fine. What happened? Nothing happened. I just... A pause. Did you post a picture today? I took one, of Mia and the dog. With a woman in it. He sat up. Clara was in the frame. Mia pulled her in. Why? Because Amy Henderson shared it. Who is Amy Henderson? She's in my book club, and she follows you because she went to school with Emma, and she shared it this morning with the caption... Another pause, and he could hear Carol physically steeling herself. She captioned it, "Looks like Nashville's favorite Navy dad found someone special. Congratulations, James." James looked at the ceiling. How many people? It's at 400 shares, James. It's been 2 hours. He was on his feet before he finished processing that. He walked to the kitchen doorway. Clara was still at the table, pen in hand, not looking up yet. He turned back toward the living room. Carol, I know. I need to fix this. I know. But James, her voice shifted. Before you do, is it wrong? Is what wrong? What Amy said. He didn't answer immediately. Is it, Carol said quieter, completely inaccurate? He stood in the middle of the cottage living room with the phone against his ear, and his eyes on the floor, and the sound of Mia rearranging shelves on the porch, and Clara's pen moving across paper in the kitchen, and he had no idea how to answer that question honestly, which was itself a kind of answer. I need to handle this, he said. Okay, Carol said. Handle it. A beat. But James, you are allowed to have something. You know that, right? He hung up. Stood there for a moment. Then he walked into the kitchen. Clara looked up from the notebook. He held his phone out and showed her the screenshot Carol had texted him. She read it. He watched her read it, watched the slight tension that moved through her face. Not shock, more like someone pressing on a bruise they'd forgotten was there. Congratulations, she said flatly. I'm going to post a correction. Don't. He looked at her. Don't post a correction, she said. That makes it a bigger story. It'll get more traction as a correction than as a congratulations. She set her pen down. I know how this works. I was in marketing for 8 years. If you engage, it grows. If you ignore it, it dies in 48 hours. People think I know what people think. She looked at him steadily. Does it matter? Does it matter what people think? No. Does the thing they think matter? Does it bother you that they think it? He sat down in the chair across from her, the chair where he'd sat last night with the candle between them. He looked at the table. No, he said. And then, because he was done, not saying true things, that's the problem. Clara was very still. It should feel like a misunderstanding, he said. A stranger looks at a picture and draws a wrong conclusion, and the normal response is, that's wrong, let me clear it up. That's the normal response. He looked at his hands. But it doesn't feel wrong, it just feels fast. Clara picked up her pen, put it down again, picked it up again. James. I know. We've known each other. I know. 4 days isn't. I know, Clara. She stopped. He looked up at her. I'm not saying it's something it isn't, he said. I know what 4 days is and what it isn't. I'm just telling you that when Carol asked me if it was inaccurate, I couldn't say yes as fast as I should have been able to. And you deserve to know that because you've been straight with me about everything, and the least I can do is be straight back. She looked at him for a long time. Outside, Mia had apparently finished her shell system and was now singing something to herself that he couldn't make out through the window, one of those half-invented songs children make up when they think nobody's listening. My ex, Clara said slowly, used to say things like that he was just being honest, that he was just telling me how he felt. She held up a hand before he could speak. I'm not comparing you to him. I'm telling you why my first instinct when someone says something like that is to check the exits. That's fair, he said. But, she looked at him. You turned your palm up last night. I did. That was your move. That was my move, he agreed. So I moved my hand. You did. And I don't do things like that without... She stopped, exhaled. I don't do things like that by accident, or out of pity, or because a storm was happening and I got sentimental. She looked at him directly the way she always did. No sideways, no hedging. I did it because I wanted to. The words sat between them. He didn't rush to fill the space around them. He let them be there, solid and clear on the table, like something with weight. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. Mia appeared in the doorway. Can we go back to the beach? They both looked at her. Please, she added, because she'd caught something in the room's atmosphere that told her she was interrupting, even if she wasn't sure what she was interrupting. Yeah, James said. Give us 5 minutes. Mia disappeared back to the porch. He heard her resume the song. James looked at Clara. Clara looked at him. 4 days isn't enough time, she said, to know anything for certain. No, he agreed, but it's enough time to know if something is real. Is it? He asked, not challenging, genuinely asking. She held his gaze. Yes, she said. I think it is. That afternoon on the beach was different from the ones before it. Not dramatically, not in any way Mia would have noticed or that anyone watching from a distance would have named. But the space between them was different now, less careful, less managed. When Mia ran ahead and left them walking side by side at the water's edge, they walked closer than they had before. Not touching, just closer. Tell me something about Emma, Clara said. He looked at her. You don't have to, she said quickly. You talked about her like she was complicated, he said, in the way that people are complicated when they're fully themselves. She didn't apologize for taking up space, which sounds simple, but it's actually very rare. He paused. She was a terrible cook. Not average terrible, genuinely, legendarily terrible. She made pasta once that I'm pretty sure qualified as a weapon. He stopped, almost smiled. She was the only person I've ever met who could make me feel completely seen and completely ridiculous at the same time. Sounds like exactly who you needed. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. I think the worst part isn't the loss. The worst part is that she would have been just been so competent at the years I've been trying to get through. She'd have figured out the school schedule and the deployment calendar and how to make Mia feel like nothing was broken. He exhaled. And I've been doing my best, and my best is good enough, but it's not. It's not hers, Clara said. No, it's not hers. She walked for a moment without speaking. Then, I don't think Mia needs her mother's version of a father, she said carefully. I think she's got the version she has, and she drew him a sign with 3 exclamation points, and she shares her shell when someone looks sad. She glanced at him. That's not a kid who feels like something's broken. He looked at Mia 30 yards ahead, jumping a wave with both feet. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to.
Option me.
It was Mia who brought it up at dinner. They were eating at the cottage table. Clara had made something simple pasta with tomatoes and garlic, And it was good, which James filed away with private amusement. And Mia was winding down the way she did at the end of beach days, slower and quieter and more honest. "I don't want to go home," she said. "We've got tomorrow," James said. "And then we go home, and then you go back to the boat." "Mia, I know," she said. "I know you have to." She looked at her plate. "I just don't want to yet." Clara reached over and tucked a strand of Mia's hair back from her face, easy, natural, the way you do for someone you're comfortable with, and said, "Then let's not go yet. We've got tonight and tomorrow. That's still something." Mia looked at her. "Will you come back with us to Nashville?" Clara looked at James. He looked back at her. "I live next door, remember?" Clara said to Mia. "I know, but will you come back with us? Together?" "We all drove here together," Clara said. "We'll all drive back." Mia seemed to find this technically satisfactory, even if it wasn't quite what she meant. She went back to her pasta. James looked at Clara. Clara looked at him with those clear, direct eyes of hers and did not look away. He thought about 4 days. About what 4 days is and what it isn't. About palm up and the last inch and the specific weight of a silence that isn't empty. He thought about what Carol had asked him. "You are allowed to have something. You know that, right?" He picked up his fork, ate his pasta, let the table be exactly what it was. 3 people at the end of a day that had been real and honest and better than anything he'd let himself have in a very long time. "Good pasta," he said to Clara. She looked at him. "Don't." "What?" "Emma's ghost is not competing with my pasta." He laughed. "A real one, full and sudden, the kind that comes out before you decide to let it." It had been a long time since something had caught him that off guard in a good direction. Mia looked up from her plate. "What's funny?" "Clara," he said. Maya looked at Clara. "What did you say?" "Something your dad needed to hear," Clara said. Mia looked between them with Emma's eyes dark, direct, missing nothing. "You two are weird," she said. "Extremely." James agreed, and Mia went back to her dinner, satisfied. That night, he sat on the porch again. Later than the nights before. The ocean was doing what it always did, and the sky had cleared after the storm, and the stars were out in the specific way they get on the coast, close and cold and very far away at the same time. He heard the screen door. Clara sat in the other chair. He looked at her. She looked at him. "One more day," she said. "One more day," he confirmed. She looked at the water. "I'm going to do it," she said. "The freelance. When we get back." "Yeah. I've been afraid of it for 8 months, doing the math checking if I have enough talking myself out of it before I talk myself into it." She paused. "I'm tired of the math. I'm going to do it." "Good," he said, simply without ceremony. She smiled at that, a real smile, the full version, the one that changed her face completely. He realized he hadn't seen the full one before tonight. He understood now why she kept it for things that earned it. "And you," she said, "when you go back. What about it? You said you don't know how to stop being alone." She turned to look at him. "What if you just stopped deciding to be? What if you stopped building the wall at the exact moment the door opens?" He was quiet. "I'm not the answer to that," she said. "I'm not saying I'm the reason you stop. I'm just saying the fact that you can ask the question means you already know there's a door." He looked at the water for a long time. "I turned my palm up," he finally said. "You did? That was new?" "I noticed." He exhaled, long and slow. The kind of exhale that carries something out with it. Not everything, not the whole weight, but enough to feel the difference. "One more day," he said again. "One more day," she agreed. They sat in the dark while the ocean told the shore the same thing it always had. "I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm always coming back." And for the first time in 4 years, James Walker sat with that sound and did not feel like a man counting down to the next departure. He felt like a man who still had a day left, and that was enough. For tonight, that was everything. The last morning arrived the way last mornings always do, too fast, And without ceremony, the light coming through the curtains, the same as it had every day before it, the ocean making the same sound, it always made as if it had no awareness and no apology for the fact that this was the final one. James was up before 5. He didn't fight it anymore. He made coffee and stood on the porch and looked at the water and did something he hadn't done in a long time. He just said thank you. Not to anyone specific, not out loud, just a quiet internal acknowledgement directed at nothing and everything. The 4 days the storm, the candles, the shell on the nightstand, the full smile he hadn't seen until last night. All of it. Thank you. He heard the screen door at 6. But it wasn't Clara. Mia came out in her pajamas, the star ones, with the 2 short legs, and she was carrying her shell with both hands the way she carried important things. She stood beside him at the porch railing and looked at the ocean and said nothing for almost a full minute, which for Mia was an extraordinary exercise in restraint. Then she said, "Do you think the ocean is the same ocean everywhere?" He looked down at her. "What do you mean? Like the ocean by the boat you're on? Is it the same ocean as this one?" He thought about it. "Connected," he said. "Same water eventually." She looked at her shell. "So when you're out there, you're in the same water as this?" "Yeah," he said. "Pretty much." She nodded slowly, processing this with the seriousness she brought to things that mattered to her. Then she held the shell out toward the ocean, not throwing it, just holding it in the direction of the water, like she was showing it something. "I'm going to keep this," she told the ocean, or him, or both. "So I remember." He put his hand on top of her head. She leaned into it. Clara came out 20 minutes later and found them still standing there, father and daughter at the railing, the shell between Mia's hands. She looked at the 2 of them and didn't say anything. She went back inside and started making breakfast, and he could hear her moving around the kitchen, and that sound. Ordinary domestic, completely unremarkable, did something to his chest that he didn't try to name. They packed slowly. Not because there was a lot to pack. 4 days in a small cottage doesn't generate much, and Mia traveled light by necessity, which was another thing she'd adapted to without being asked to. They packed slowly because none of them were rushing toward the end of it, and they all knew it, and nobody said so out loud. Mia wrapped her shells in a dish towel from the kitchen. Clara asked if that was okay, and James said he'd buy the diner one to replace it, and Clara said that wasn't what she was asking. She was asking if it was okay with him, the shells, the keeping of things. He understood what she actually meant and said yes. He carried the bags to the car, made 3 trips because Mia kept adding things to her backpack at the last second. A smooth rock she'd found a piece of driftwood that was allegedly shaped like a dog. The dish towel full of shells, which she insisted on carrying herself. Clara did a walkthrough of the cottage before they locked up. He watched her go room by room checking for things left behind. And he thought about how she'd turned her phone off 2 nights ago and hadn't turned it back on since. She'd mentioned it once casually the next morning, still off, still fine, and that was the whole report. She came back to the front door. "We're good," she said. He locked the door and put the key in the lockbox, and they stood there for a moment, the 3 of them, looking at the cottage that had held them for 4 days. "Same time next year?" Mia asked. James looked at Clara. Clara looked at James. "Maybe," he said. Mia accepted this as a yes and walked to the car. The drive back was different from the drive out. On the way there had been the careful distance of 2 people who didn't know each other well enough to fill silence comfortably. Now the silence was different, fuller, less like a gap, and more like a shared thing. Mia fell asleep in the back seat within the first 40 minutes, the backpack on her lap, the dish towel full of shells tucked against her side. James drove. Clara sat with her feet up on the dash. She'd asked permission first, which had made him smile, and she had the notebook open on her knee, but she wasn't writing. She was looking at the road the way she'd looked at the water that first morning, present without narrating it. Around the 2-hour mark, she said, "I'm sending the resignation Monday." He glanced at her. "Yeah, Monday morning, first thing before I can talk myself out of it." She looked at the notebook. "I've got 3 potential clients already. From before people I worked with who said if I ever went independent to let them know. She paused. I always thought that was just something people said. Maybe they meant it. Maybe they did. She clicked the pen. I'll find out. You'll find out, he agreed. She looked at him. You're not going to tell me it's going to be fine. I don't know if it's going to be fine, he said. I know you're going to do it anyway. She was quiet for a moment. Then, that's better than fine, actually. He kept his eyes on the road. I know. She went back to the notebook, and this time she started writing, and he drove, and Mia slept in the back seat with her shells, and the Tennessee hills came back up around the highway, the way they always did on the approach to Nashville, green and familiar and slightly smaller than you remembered them when you'd been away. Carol was at the apartment when they got back. She had done the thing she always did when she was nervous about something, and trying not to show it, she had cleaned. His apartment was immaculate. The kitchen counter, the bathroom, Mia's room, the shelf above the refrigerator where Emma's photo sat next to Mia's ocean drawing. All of it spotless and deliberate and Carol. She opened the door before he knocked, which meant she'd been listening for the elevator. She looked at him, then past him at Clara, who was holding Mia's backpack, because Mia had fallen back asleep in the car, and James had carried her up. Then back at him. Good trip, Carol asked. Good trip, he said. Carol looked at Clara properly, then not sizing her up the way people do when they're deciding if they approve, but with the direct, honest attention of a woman who had been worrying about her brother for 4 years and was now looking at the first piece of evidence that maybe he was going to be all right. I'm Carol, she said. I know, Clara said. James talks about you. Good things, I hope. He said you make him honest, Clara said. He said it like a complaint. I think he meant it as a compliment. Carol looked at James. He carried Mia past both of them, without making eye contact. He heard Carol say behind him quietly, but not quietly enough, I like her. And Clara even more quietly, don't tell him that yet. He put Mia in her bed and pulled the comforter up and set the shell on the nightstand and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her the way he always did, making sure she was real, making sure she was safe, making sure the thing he loved most in the world had made it back intact. She had. He went back to the kitchen. Carol was making tea because Carol always made tea when she was emotional and didn't want to talk about it. Clara was sitting at the table in the chair where he'd sat that first morning, staring at the wall, and she looked comfortable there in a way that did something to him, some specific rearrangement he couldn't fully describe. I'll get out of your way, Carol said, setting 3 mugs on the counter with practiced efficiency. I just wanted to see you got back safe. You could stay, James said. I have a husband, James, and a daughter who has a soccer game tomorrow that I've already rescheduled twice. She picked up her keys, looked at him with the full force of 11 years of being his big sister and the last 4 years of watching him run himself into the ground. You look different, she said. It's been 4 days. I know how long it's been. She kissed him on the cheek. Different, she said again. Like that settled it. She nodded at Clara. It was good to meet you. You too, Clara said. And Carol left, and the apartment was quiet, and it was just the 2 of them, and a sleeping 6-year-old, and 3 mugs of tea on the counter. Clara stayed for another hour. They drank the tea at the kitchen table and talked about nothing important. She asked about the neighborhood. He told her about the coffee place on the corner that was better than it looked, and the Thai restaurant 2 blocks over that Mia was convinced served the best noodles in Tennessee. She told him about the freelance clients, named them properly, this time explained what they needed and how she'd approach it and what scared her about starting. He listened the way he had learned to listen to her, without filling the spaces she was still working through, without offering solutions she hadn't asked for. At some point, she looked at the photo above the refrigerator. He'd noticed her not looking at it since they'd gotten back, which was its own kind of attention. That's her, she said. Yeah. She looked at it for a long moment. Emma looked back at her the way she looked at everyone direct, slightly amused entirely herself. She looks like Mia, Clara said. Mia looks like her. Right. She looked back at her mug. I'm not trying to... She stopped, started again. I want you to know that I don't think this is that I'm not... Clara. I just want to say it so it's said. Okay. I'm not trying to replace something, she said. I don't think that's what this is. I don't think you can replace something like that, and I don't think you should try, and I'm not interested in being a replacement for anything. She looked at him steadily. I'm interested in being something that hasn't existed before, something new. If that's... She paused. If that's something you can do. He looked at the table. Emma's voice in his memory, sharp and warm and absolutely hers. Stop managing everything, James. Just live in it. He looked up. I turned my palm up, he said. The corner of her mouth moved. You keep saying that. Because it's the truest thing I've got right now, he said. I don't have a bigger speech. I have one thing I did that I meant, and I'm standing behind it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up, picked up her keys, and walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. I'm right next door, she said. Not as an invitation, not as a pressure, just as a fact, a true, available, quietly important fact. I know where you live, he said. She almost smiled, the full one almost. Good night, James. Good night, Clara. The door closed. He heard her door 4B open and close a few seconds later. He stood in his kitchen for a moment. Then he looked at Emma's photo. She looked back at him, direct, slightly amused, entirely herself. There you go, she would have said. Was that so hard? He turned off the kitchen light and went to check on Mia one more time. He shipped out again 3 days later. Harris had called on day 4 of leave situation in the Pacific stabilized. You've got your full-time walker, but report Monday 0600. And Monday had come the way Mondays always did, indifferent to everything that had happened in the days before it. He packed his sea bag in the dark at 4 a.m. Mia was asleep. He'd said goodbye to her the night before the 3 sentences he always said, but different this time, not performed, not managed. Not said with the quiet terror of a man who doesn't know if the thing he's saying is true. He said them, and meant every word of them, all the way to the bottom. He was in the hallway with his bag when he heard 4B. Clara opened her door. She was in the gray hoodie again, hair up in the quick knot that meant she hadn't slept well. She looked at him and his sea bag and the dark hallway, and she didn't say anything dramatic. Coffee, she said. I made coffee. You've got 20 minutes before you have to leave. He looked at her. James. Yeah, he said. Okay. He left his bag in the hall and went inside and drank the best cup of coffee he'd had in years, standing in her kitchen in his uniform at 4 a.m. while she sat on the counter. And they talked about nothing important. Again, her first client call was Tuesday. She was terrified she'd made a list of everything she was going to say. He told her about a sailor on his crew who had once delivered a client presentation mid-deployment via satellite phone from the South China Sea and landed the account. She looked at him. Is that true? Completely. That's insane. That's the Navy. She smiled at that, the full one. He was beginning to understand it was reserved for things that caught her off guard in a good direction the same way his laugh was. Something they had in common that they hadn't known about 4 days ago. At 4:20, he picked up his bag. She walked him to the hallway the way she'd done this from the beginning. No ceremony, no performance, just present. Hey, she said. He looked at her. Come back, she said. Simply, without making it more than it was. The same way she'd said okay in this same hallway 10 days ago, flat and calm and completely serious. He looked at her for a moment. That's the plan, he said. And he went. 7 months later, James Walker drove back to the same cottage. Different season. The light was lower and cooler, the beach emptier than it had been in summer. The town pulled slightly into itself, the way small coastal towns do in the off-season, quieter and more honest. He had Mia in the back seat. Her backpack was improbably heavy again. She'd brought the shell. Clara was already there when they pulled up. She had driven ahead, arrived the night before, gotten the keys. He'd told her she didn't have to. She'd told him she wanted to get the place ready, which was practical enough to be true, and thoughtful enough to be something more than practical. She came out the front door when she heard the car. Mia was unbuckled before the engine was off. She hit the porch steps at full speed, and Clara caught her without bracing for it. The way you catch someone you've been catching for a while, without thinking, without breaking your footing. James got out slowly, watched his daughter's arms around Clara's neck, and Clara's hand spread flat across Mia's back, holding her securely, and he felt the thing he had been feeling for 7 months accumulate into something he finally had a word for. Home. Not the cottage, not Nashville, not any address or any building. These two people. This specific configuration of arms and laughter, and a child talking too fast about everything that had happened since she'd last seen Clara 3 weeks ago, and a woman listening the way she always listened fully without performing it. Clara looked up over Mia's shoulder and found him standing by the car. She looked at him the way she had that first morning on the porch, direct, clear, without hedging anything. He picked up the bags, walked up the porch steps. Mia had already run inside to check if the shell collection she'd arranged on the windowsill last time was still there. It was. Clara had made sure of it, and her voice was coming back through the screen door full of the specific joy of a child discovering that the things she cared about have been kept safe in her absence. James stopped at the top step. Clara was right there, close enough that he could see the tiredness in her eyes. That was the good kind. Now the tired of someone who has been working hard at something that is entirely her own. The freelance had worked. 3 clients in the first month, 5 by the third, a full roster by the time the leaves changed. She had told him about it in the long calls they'd figured out how to make work across time zones and satellite delays, and the particular technical indignity of a ship's communication system. She had sent him voice memos when the calls wouldn't connect. He had listened to them in his bunk at 2 in the morning, with his eyes open in the dark, her voice in his ear talking about a client who wanted a campaign around the word resilience, and how she kept wanting to tell him he was using the word wrong. He had laughed out loud in his bunk at 2 in the morning. His bunkmate had told him to keep it down. He had not kept it down. He looked at her now, standing on the porch of the same cottage where he had said the truest thing he knew how to say, and he put the bags down. She looked at him. "You're here," she said. "I'm here," he said. Mia found the shells. "I heard." She looked at him for another moment. Then she reached out and straightened the collar of his jacket, not because it needed straightening, but because it was something to do with her hands that meant something without requiring a speech. He let her. Then he picked up the bags and walked through the door. The cottage smelled like coffee and salt and something cooking on the stove. Mia was at the windowsill arranging her shells alongside the ones she'd left before chattering to herself about the system and which new ones went where and whether the shark tooth that was probably a mussel shell should have its own section. James set the bags down and stood in the middle of the room and looked at his daughter's back bent over her shells and heard Clara come in behind him and felt the specific quiet weight of a moment that doesn't announce itself as significant, but will be the one you remember years later when someone asks you when things changed. This was when things changed. Not in the hallway with the sea bag, not on the kitchen table with the candle burning low, not even on the porch with the ocean saying the same thing it always said. Here, in the middle of an ordinary room, on an ordinary afternoon, with shells on the windowsill and something on the stove, and the door open behind him, and no part of him, not one single part, looking for the exit. He had spent 4 years being a soldier and a father and nothing else. He had been competent and present and hollowed out, and he had called that surviving, and he had believed in the way you believe things you've never challenged, that surviving was all he had left. He did not believe that anymore. He was 34 years old, and he was standing in a room where someone had made coffee for his arrival and kept his daughter's shells safe and driven ahead to get the keys, and he understood now fully. Finally, without the distance he had always kept between himself and the understanding that surviving had never been the point. Coming home was the point. Not to a place, not to a door or an address or a building. To a life that was still against everything entirely worth living. That was the point. That had always been the point. And James Walker. Navy man single father, the man who had been on his knees in a hallway over a crayon drawing. When everything changed, finally completely came home.